Start game now. Hey, AT-AT Commanders, what's up? What? Someone's been stealing Star Wars ideas? Well, who would do that? Atari? What are you talking about? Oh, Star Raiders for your Atari 2600 VCS system. Star Raiders came bundled with this video touchpad controller and an overlay, and it's the only game I know that specifically uses the video touchpad. The video touchpad can also be used with other games that use the keyboard controller or the children's controller, but this is the only one that actually specifically had an overlay just for the video touchpad. And as you can see underneath are just black buttons, but you put this on here to kind of map the buttons, and it uses a whopping 5 buttons out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 buttons. Let's look at the game real quick. And yeah, you definitely can see a Star Wars influence. It kind of looks like something out of Star Wars, especially like one of the Death Star battle runs or something like that. You can almost imagine that that's Luke Skywalker's hands. Let's go ahead and put Star Raiders in my Atari 7800 Pro system and just find out if this is worthy of the movie it rips off or not. Let's go to the game. Star Raiders was released in 1982 and was bundled with the video touchpad controller, which is basically just a repackaged keypad controller, or functionally the same as the children's controller. It is a first-person space shooter simulation game and is based on a 1979 game of the same name for the Atari 8-bit computers. When I was thinking about it, I thought they actually ripped off the Star Raiders name by taking 2 words from George Lucas films, taking the star from Star Wars, and Raiders from Raiders of the Lost Ark. But since Raiders of the Lost Ark came well after the computer game first came out, I guess the only thing they ripped off was the Star Wars portion of this game. It might be the only thing that they didn't rip off with the Raiders name. According to the back of the box, you are to climb into the fabulous Starfighter and warp through the galaxy with Commander Champion and Lee Sanner Rourke, help the Atari force destroy the Krylon Menace, which sounds a lot like the Cylon Menace from Battlestar Galactica, and rescue the last vital starbase and avenge the Doom Planet. I'm a little confused if the Doom Planet was already destroyed or if it was just badly named, because in the comic book that it came with, you could actually visit the Doom Planet. But I'm wondering if the original concept was that the planet was destroyed and now you're trying to get revenge on the Krylons. This game also came with an Atari Force comic book which talks to you about Commander Champion and Lee Sanner Rourke and some other crew members. Atari Force was a comic series made by DC Comics during the height of Atari's popularity. It just featured basically regular comic book characters, but their uniforms featured the Atari Fuji symbol on them. There wasn't really much Atari related other than they tried to shoehorn them in various video game series when they were packaging some of these comic books with games. I think it was like 5 or 6 games came packaged with a mini comic, and there was also a full-length comic on newsstands as well that was different from the pack-in comics. Really, the Commander Champion and Lee Sanner Rourke has nothing to do with the game, as when you're playing the game, it basically feels like a solo mission. The goal of the game is to avenge the Doom Planet by defeating a set number of enemies before you die. There's 4 levels of difficulty, and not only do the enemies get a little bit more difficult with each level, but the number of enemies you have to defeat gets increased as well. The easiest level you defeat 10, and then it goes up by 10 to 20, 30, and 40 enemies at the highest level. You will face 3 types of enemies during the game. Cruisers look pretty much exactly like TIE fighters. There's also fighters as well, which are not TIE fighters, but they kind of look like the ships from the Tron movies. That might just be a coincidence. Each of those enemies will take 1 hit to destroy. There's also Base Stars, which is a direct ripoff of the Base Star ships from the Battlestar Galactica series. I'm surprised they didn't rename it, but basically it kind of looks like 2 ships connected in the middle. These guys can only be defeated at close range due to their shields that they have. You start the game in cockpit view, and you use the right standard joystick controller to control your ship. It has one of those kind of flight controls where pushing up on the controller will make your ship go down, and vice versa. The button will fire photon torpedoes. I wonder where they ripped that off of. And there's also a target marker in the middle that kind of looks like a pair of tongs that are used to roast marshmallows on a fire. Interestingly enough, according to the manual, the best time to shoot your cannons is not when something is in the middle of your target, but just below it. The manual actually says that there's a little arc below the target marker, and that's the best time to shoot at the enemy. At the bottom of the screen, you have a status bar. The E on the bar shows you how much energy you have left. You get more energy the higher the difficulty because you have more enemies to defeat, but if it gets down to 0, you are dead. The T shows you how many targets you have left to destroy in order to reach your goal. There's also rotating letters that show you how your various systems are doing. P is for how your photon torpedoes are doing, E is for engines, S is for shields, and C is for your attack computer itself. If the letter is green, everything's okay. If it's yellow, it's damaged, and if it's red, it's destroyed. And you get various sorts of effects depending on damage and being destroyed. If it is destroyed, it doesn't mean it's fully destroyed, but it means it's going to be very intermittent, or the screen will be blinking or something along that status. Your status bar itself will also have different shades of color depending where the enemy is. If your status bar is red, the enemy is right behind you. If it's green, your enemy is out of range. And if it's blue, it is visible and it is right in front of you. So you're going to want to use your radar to try to actually be able to visibly see it. Even though it's visible, you may not see it on the screen. The video touchpad goes into the right controller port and uses 5 of its 12 buttons. The first 2 buttons switch between the first-person view and the map view. If you're on the map view, it is a 4x4 grid consisting of 16 squares. The enemy is represented by what looks like a red Pac-Man. You are represented by a blue bar, but you can move the bar with the joystick and turn it to a red bar. That's where you want to go. Once you select where you want to go using the joystick, you can hit the hyper warp button on the video touchpad to hyper warp your way there. And the star base kind of looks like an old-fashioned Bible to me with kind of a little cross in the middle. You can use the star base to recharge your energy up to 7 times. If you go there 7 times, it will blow up. However, odds are you will not have to use it that often because the enemies move pretty quickly. You probably won't have time to recharge more than a couple times. The enemies will also try to defeat your starbase. Basically, once the game starts, they will make a direct path to there. And if they land on the starbase square, you have 30 seconds to defeat them before they blow up your starbase. You will not lose your game if the starbase is defeated, but it will probably affect your rank on the game. There's also a button to turn on and off your shields. If your shields are off, space is black when you're in the first person view, and if it is on, they are blue. You definitely want to turn your shields on in the game because one hit without your shields will defeat you no matter how much energy you have left. Also, depending on your difficulty switches, if your difficulty switches are in the wrong place when you're starting the game, your shields will automatically be off. This happened to me and I was wondering why I was dying so quickly until I figured out I had to turn my shields on. Once you end the game, you'll be given a rank. It starts as a cook and it works all its way up. Most of the time I ended up being a cook, but trust me, I probably wouldn't be a very good cook, but there's just nothing lower than that. The graphics of the game are very basic, but I did like the star effect as you fly through space. I also thought that the effects when damaged with the blinking screen and the various sound effects were cool as well. Speaking of sound, there is very minimal sound, but they did use a clever alert system. For instance, if an enemy is visible, you will hear 3 short tones. This is a family-friendly game, except for the fact that this game is all about revenge. On eBay, loose copies went for about $3, which means the sellers are basically not making anything when they sell these games. And I would not recommend selling a loose copy as you really need to have the touchpad controller with it. Loose copies with the touchpad controller went for $6 to $10. That includes shipping, and complete copies went for $10 to $14. There was also several new copies online available for about $20 as well. Even though the graphics and sound are minimal, I did think it was an effective game to use with the touchpad. Now, I played this on the Atari Greatest Hits collection on the DS, and it's okay on there, but if you actually use it on the physical system, I found this to be a much more enjoyable game. It actually does a halfway job for its limitations of simulating flying a spaceship through space, trying to defeat enemies, especially using the touchpad and with all the damage effects. When you get down to the last enemy and your ship is damaged and now all of a sudden asteroids are flying at you as well, it really does put some pressure on you and does a pretty good job for the limitations of simulating what's supposed to do. So it is a game to experience. Targeting, though, felt like very hit or miss. I felt very lucky if I hit a ship while trying to engage with the enemy. This is not a game that is very target specific. It felt more like luck than every time I destroyed one, but it was still somewhat enjoyable. So looking at my list, I am not going to put it in the top 2. I definitely like Haunted House better, and Kangaroo is just lots of fun, but I did like the experience a little better than Dark Chambers. So I'm going to recommend that if you stumble upon it, you go ahead and play it with the touchpad. There's nothing that can replicate the feeling of playing it with the touchpad, especially when it comes to emulation. So if you have a 2600 and come across it with the touchpad, give it a try, but it's not something that you definitely have to go out of your way for. So it's going to be my new number 3 game. So there you go, Star Raiders for the Atari 2600. It is definitely ripping off several properties, but it can be a little bit fun. And it will also be covered on the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast, a member of the Retro Junkies Network, which I am as well. You can find them on iTunes. Don't forget, if you enjoy videos like this, go ahead and click the like and subscribe buttons. That would mean a lot to me. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Go to either one and search for The No Swear Gamer. I totally appreciate that. Thank you guys for giving me a little part of your time, and until next time, I look forward to seeing you right here on The No Swear Gamer. Take care, everyone.